Canada could be sitting on the biggest housing bubble of all time.
Everyday Victorians are shoplifting.
It's the #1 concern right across the country.
We fall into that category.
Cost of living concerns among Australians is on a rapid rise.
Retailers are exploring different methods to combat theft.
What happens when the world's two most stable economies face an unprecedented economic crisis? Canada and Australia have been seeing a steady rise in their cost of living for the past decade, with more families finding it harder to survive in both countries.
House prices in Sydney are still going up.
Today, we'll be diving deep into the economic turmoil gripping Australia and Canada, focusing on the soaring cost of living, housing crisis, and falling living standards, examining how they got here and what it means for their citizens. To understand the current economic crises in Australia and Canada, we need to look at key factors that have led to these situations. The cost of living in Australia and Canada has been rising steadily over the past decade. Just recently, the Canadian government announced that their annual inflation rate has risen from its 3-year low of 2.7% to 2.9%.
We're seeing at 2.9%, which means inflation is stubbornly hard to contain.
The job markets in both countries have been severely affected as well. In Australia, the downturn in the mining sector has led to significant job losses, particularly in regions dependent on this industry. Canada faces similar difficulties in its oil-rich provinces like Alberta, where thousands of jobs have been lost due to declining oil prices and environmental policies. The geographical disparity in job opportunities is evident in both countries, with major cities attracting the lion's share of investment and job growth. Meanwhile, rural and remote areas struggle with declining industries and limited employment options. This urban-rural divide exacerbates economic inequality and contributes to regional tensions. Australia is feeling the pressure too. The price of food and grocery at Coles and Woolworths rose by an annualized 9.6% increase in April, according to data by investment bank UBS. The data has been disputed by the supermarket giants, challenging the notion that inflation has peaked.
Look, I think it's just the nature of any relationship that there's going to be that anxiety.
And sadly, this might be true. The explosive rise in prices wasn't driven by Australians' desires to buy more products, but rather by the fact that the two companies operate within a duopoly holding a combined share of 65% of the Australian supermarket market share. Due to their size and reach, Coles and Woolworths are the only real options suppliers have in Australia. Both retailers have similar margin expectations, promotional allowances, and advertising support requirements, meaning there is no real competition between them or their shelf pricing. This doesn't happen by accident, and it causes real financial strain on businesses who are forced to increase their prices, ultimately hurting consumers. Coles and Woolworths are the only real winners in this situation. But this problem isn't unique to Australia. Canada is facing similar problems in their airline market, with WestJet and Air Canada controlling nearly 85% of the market, subsequently jacking up prices and slowing down innovation in the space. The rising cost of living is squeezing household budgets in both countries, making it increasingly difficult for families to make ends meet. Another major issue plaguing both economies is the housing market crisis. In cities like Sydney in Australia and Toronto in Canada, property prices have soared to unsustainable levels.
But across town in Birchgrove, this property, also in need of some TLC, passed in at $2.95 million.
This rapid increase in housing costs has made home ownership unattainable for many, leading to a growing number of households spending a significant portion of their income on rent. In Australia, more than 30% of renters are now classified as being in rental stress. Canada faces a similar situation, with a large portion of the population struggling to afford adequate housing.
It's already hard to afford before, but now it's just even more difficult.
The situation is further complicated by foreign investment. In cities like Sydney and Vancouver, foreign buyers have snapped up properties, often leaving them vacant. This reduces the supply of available housing, pushing prices even higher. Canada is one of the fastest growing countries in the world, with a population surpassing 40 million in June 2023. This growing population needs places to call home. The vast majority of that growth comes from immigrants. These newcomers are essential to help solve the labor shortage problem and offset Canada's falling birth rate. However, this increased demand has put upward pressure on home prices as more people compete for housing. But solely blaming immigrants for rising home prices would be absurd. Other factors, such as low investment into new housing construction projects, are to blame. Building permits for single-family homes are as low as during the pandemic. Labor shortages, increasing material costs, and supply shortages are cutting into profitability, thus deterring investors from starting new projects. Australia is facing similar issues with their property market being considered one of the most expensive in the world, with Sydney and Melbourne regularly featuring among the list of least affordable housing markets. Similar to Canada, Australia is struggling to keep up with the increased demand for housing due to new immigrants. The rising cost of living and the housing crisis are contributing to a broader decline in the standard of living. Australians and Canadians are among the most indebted populations in the world, with household debt levels reaching record highs. This high level of debt leaves households vulnerable to economic shocks and reduces their ability to save for the future. Moreover, wage growth has not kept pace with the rising costs. In both countries, real wage growth has been sluggish, failing to match the rate of inflation. This stagnation in wages means that many families are finding it harder to maintain their previous standards of living, leading to increased financial stress and lower overall well-being. Public services and infrastructure have come under immense pressure as well. Canada's healthcare system, already stretched thin, has struggled to cope with the pandemic's demands. In Australia, investment in infrastructure projects has been delayed or cancelled, further slowing economic recovery. In conclusion, while Australia and Canada are facing significant economic challenges, they also have the resources and opportunities to overcome them. By addressing the root causes of their problems and implementing strategic reforms, both nations can build more sustainable and resilient economies. It's a complex journey, but with careful planning and execution, a brighter future is within reach. What do you think about the economic crises in Australia and Canada? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more in-depth analysis on global economic issues. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay informed and stay curious.
Oh, boo-hoo! It's just that the world is so damn rotten, there's so much hate and evil, 3D Squelton just doesn't see a point in living anymore. What's the point? Oh, boo-hoo-hoo!